Everybody, it is Romania Black, and we are on episode 9 of A Place Further Than the Universe. And last week was the Rule of 8, and seeing them all clutching the railing of a ship as I thought they were going to be flung to their death into the ice cold water of the Atlantic, it did not disappoint. The Rule of 8 stands up, but we're on episode 9 now of this series out of 13 episodes, and we are on our way to Antarctica. It seems like we're fairly close, although the end of episode 8 seemed like there was still some ways to go, so we'll deal with that. But with that being said, I have some comments for episodes 6 and 7 I want to talk about before we dive into episode 9 today and see what we get. So Tater Salad 666 says for episode 6, this whole episode has a wonderful buildup of discovering a problem, denying it, and then the tension between them on how to handle it when they can't deny it anymore. And I love Tater Salad talking about that for episode 6, but honestly, that kind of applies to this series as a whole, because they have a problem, and that's them going back to Antarctica with the unresolved, I'm sure it's, with unresolved stuff about Shirase's mom, but then how are they going to handle it? And they can't deny anymore that now that Shirase's on the ship, like Takako is gone, what are they going to do about it? So it's really interesting. I feel like that entire sentence that Tater Salad said for episode 6 kind of encompasses the entire series as a whole. We'll see where we go with it though, but I thought that was really cool. So thank you, Tater Salad. William Pina for episode 7 says, I always took the line, we're going to see the sky, as meaning that because they lost Takako last time, they returned with their heads down. Essentially, they want to complete their expedition since the last one was considered a failure. Yeah, I totally agree with that 100%, that last time they kind of ended up leaving without it being completed, and then it was abandoned and put on hiatus for a while, and then they had the bad reputation and everything. So I feel like this is definitely a time for them to kind of redeem themselves and to redeem the expedition for Takako's sake, especially since she's no longer with them. So that's really good to notice. And then I Hate Piano, as well as Viri Amura over on Discord, we're talking about the don't step on the silver part of the boat, the little landing strip that's there in episode 7, or just the landing rather. And so I hate Viri Yamura had talked about how some people, some cultures believe that spirits reside in the landings, and if you step on it, you could release the spirit or anger it or something like that. And then I Hate Piano says, although it is slowly dying out as a custom, it has long been considered bad acting to step on the threshold in part of a Japanese house. There are various theories as to why, including that it is a religiously sacred part of the house and it can easily damage the house. My favorite theory is that there might be a ninja lurking under the floor and he might stab you with a katana through the gap in the tatami mat. That seems like a little bit more hazardous than it needs to be. But that was really cool. I like how we have multiple superstitions across cultures. They all kind of are related in different ways to different varying degrees, but it's cool to see how culturally we have superstitions that kind of transcend that. So that was really neat. So yay. But yeah, I'm super excited for episode 9 for us to get started. Before we start, though, I want to give a shout out over to our philanthropy tier over on Patreon to thank you all so much for your extra support each month. I really appreciate it, and it helps out the channel so much. So thank you very, very much to Alex Cornejo, to Be Happy, to Bisa, to Damage3245, to Dana, to Devorin, to Danger Zone, to Destiny Marie, to Fisho, to Ghostly Turnip, to Ichu, to Eric, to Elfreya, to Lyndon, to Liam Posel, Matthew Palfinier, Willie Morris, Murphew, Translucent Men, Shimoyama, and Sunspots. Thank you all so very much for all of your kindness and support this month. And thank you very much to Patreon, all of the patrons across all of the tiers, and everybody on YouTube that likes and subscribes to videos. All of my love. I appreciate it so much. But enough of that. I've got my beverage ready, waiting to go. I'm excited to see, are we going to get to Antarctica or are we not? What are we going to do? So I'm excited to see what all we get this episode in that regard. So we're not going to waste any more time. We are going to dive right into A Place Further Than the Universe, episode 9. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And I'll see you all on the other side. There will come a time when I get all of the side characters of this series names correct, but it was not today. I was like, dang it. After episode 7, I was like, I've got everybody's names down. I know who is who. And then immediately floundered in this episode. So, wow. This episode was nothing like I expected at all, especially from the OP to now. So I do like the idea that we start out with this with everybody not just running on the ship now, but we're playing baseball, we're playing catch, we are like doing jump rope, which the jump rope had a nice continuity throughout the episode. We're doing races and different competitions, like just anything to help everybody stay mobile and moving and exercising, which is great. But the idea of them doing the contests and being like, you saw what the winning team got. They got all this red meat. We need to pull out of the fish tier at least so we don't get hot dogs. If you've not watched Blue Lock, none of that will make sense. But if you've watched Blue Lock, you know where I was coming from in that reaction. But yeah, poor Yuzuki. I feel for her not being the athletic one of the group. I love the jump roping analogy of you just keep practicing over and over again. When someone tells you something that you can't do or puts an obstacle in your way, it is not that you have to give up, but you just keep whittling away more and more until you get there. And that, I love that theme of just when you are given an obstacle, you just keep on whittling away at it until you accomplish it. And that's represented so many times in this episode with the jump roping, with them going back to see where Takako was, with the whole thing about Japan and the only place they can go in to enter Antarctica. Okay, we'll talk about that. But all of that, I loved the theme of just try again, and then seeing her get to make landfall in Antarctica. It felt very much like the moon landing. One small step for Shirase, one giant leap for Japan, you know. It felt like such a titular moment of her being like, I told you so. You all said I couldn't make it, and here I am, so suck it in your face, as they would yell. But yeah, and they talk about how she doesn't seem like the type that would do jump rope, which is going to come back when we get all of her playing jump rope later on. So nice. That seems, and they also threw so much shade at her, being like, well, she's more short-tempered than she looks, and you know, she's more bullheaded than she looks, and all that. But then we have Gin, Toto Gin. I guess I'd been calling her Toto this whole time. So when they referred to her as Gin, I was like, oh yeah, that is her name. Oh yeah, uh-huh. But she has like the flower bowl that she's going to be carrying, I guess, for Takako's birthday. Here's the thing, Toshio. Toshio, my dude. Toshio, my dude. Yes. So when Toshio came up to the brig and said he was in love, I thought that he was referring to Yume Sasaki. I thought he was referring to the short-haired astronomer. I thought he was referring to her. And then, because in episode 7, this is like 7 degrees of Romania getting confused, because in episode 7, I was confusing Yume for Gin because Gin's hair was shorter, and it looked more like Yume's just without the glasses. And so I was confused in episode 7. So my confusion of who Gin was translating into this episode. And I was like, oh, because at first I was like, I honestly thought back when they were first introduced in episode 7 that if Toshio was going to be getting with anybody on this ship, it was going to be Yasumoto, the pink girl that got buzzed at the bar. I thought he was going to go after her, that she seemed like his type, because she kind of presses his buttons, but he doesn't know what to do about it. And so it kind of like, they had a dynamic that I was like, okay, maybe it's them. But then she's always around Yume, so I was like, well, maybe Yasumoto's into Yume. I don't know. But then when he's like, oh, I like Gin, I was like, oh, her? When they said she was out of his league, look, I don't want to, whenever you say the phrase out of my league, I'm like, you know, leagues are subjective. And I don't think anybody is better than anyone. I don't think that. But Gin is very stoic and very professional and very high up. her personality just kind of elevates her to being kind of distant. And Toshio's personality is very warm and kind of intimate, just from what we've seen of him. So I was like, your personalities don't seem like they mesh at all. Granted, Gin is beautiful. But then the more I was around her and Kane, I was like, but Ikane's kind of like Toshio too. She's kind of warm and intimate. So maybe Toshio is her type because Kane is her type. But Takako, you know, whether or not Takako loved Gin in a romantic sense and was bisexual because she had a kid, she had Shirase, whether or not she was bisexual or not, I don't know. The series is not going to tell us that because series, you know, they don't want to be censored for people having more than one sexuality. Staring hard at the camera on that one. But I feel like whether Takako was bisexual and liked Gin romantically or not, we don't know. Did Gin romantically like Takako? I think she did. I think she was in love with Takako. And then Takako died and she blames herself. And I think Kane, you know, has kind of, you know, Kane was their friend as well. And she's kind of stepped up. Now, whether Kane loves Gin, I don't know. But I kind of took their relationship as Gin loved Takako, which is why losing her was so hard. And then she had to come back and see the daughter and, you know, had all this guilt and everything. So yeah. So this episode called Antarctic Love Story, the Blizzard arc. I like that we had an arc in one episode, which was a lot of fun. I also like the penguins. I love that Toto and Shirase are connected by the penguins. They both love penguins. That's their big connection. But they're a lot more similar than they would think, right? But I love the caption is, how's the love life? I can't put it into words. Well, so yeah, so Toshio is in love with Gin. I love the one girl, the girl from the kitchen that she's just looking at him like, dude, no. I love that she's just like, do you know how many lesbians are on this ship? More than you think. Now, I thought for a second, also here's the thing. Toshio was not serious about Gin. He may have said he was in love with her, but y'all, when it took him 30 seconds to look over at the girl from the kitchen and be like, so if not her, you? And she's like, oh, are you freaking kidding me? If it takes you that little time to move on, you weren't in love to begin with, my friend. You just had a crush. And that's fine. And that's fine that you had a crush, Toshio. But I was kind of rooting for the one guy, the buff guy, to be into the kitchen cook. So we'll see where that goes. But yeah, she's like, they're all going to be exasperated by your infatuation. I love that Hinata just comes out and says it. She's pretty much out of your league. And you know what? I respect Toshio for saying that he likes strong women. And he says, you know, somebody that can protect him. Good for Toshio. Good for Toshio to defy toxic masculinity and male stereotypes and just say that he likes a lady that can, like, protect him. I'm like, good for you, Toshio. I'm rooting for you. I don't think that it bothers his personality at all. Like, that's pretty admirable for a guy to admit that. You know, I'm totally down for that. I just don't think his personality, I don't know. Here's the big difference between Toshio and Kane, though. Toshio and Kane both have very warm personalities. They seem very, like, kind of, like, high energy, and that seems to balance well with Gin. But here's the thing. Kane is insanely confident. Kane is a confident woman that's like, she's bold, not afraid to do things. Her spirit is kind of similar to Takako's, so she's got a type, Gin does. And even though Toshio has the warmth to him, he doesn't quite exude the charisma that Kane does, and I don't know if that matches well with Gin, right? Totally about him. I think it's cool that he's admits what he does. I think that's really nice of him, but they also say, you know, we said not to bring romance onto this ship. And he's like, I can't stop myself. And she's like, no. The lady in the kitchen's like, we don't bring romance into this. I wonder if the reason we don't bring romance into this has to do with Takako and Gin's relationship dynamic from before. I wonder if there's something to do with that. We got just a wee bit more when it came to the backstory of Takako's death. We don't know what happened. I wonder if she fell. My thought was that she fell and then she froze to death. And as she was freezing to death, she looked up at the sky. Because when she said it's very beautiful, I wondered if she slipped and fell and hit her head and they didn't know where she was and she couldn't tell them because she had a concussion and she was looking up at the sky when she was dying because they couldn't find her in time before she froze to death. And that's when she said the northern lights or whatnot were very beautiful. I don't know. Or the aurora borealis. I don't know. We get a little bit into that. The fact that the last words she said to Geen that we know of at this point are, it's very beautiful. That was haunting. That was haunting. And show knows how to balance it being really funny and relatable and then getting really super serious really fast. So Toshio thought that Shirase would know Geen because she'd hung out with her in the past. But the reality is that Shirase really didn't hang out with her much. She hung out with her a lot, but they didn't really talk, right? She was like 10, you know? I also love when he puts his chin on the mop and she like smacks him with it. So yeah, so the girls decide, they're like, you know what? Not a lot of people, people not watching the expedition video, of course not. Why wouldn't they? How dare they not watch the videos they're making? Those are classic. But they're like, how do we uptick our engagement? Well, everybody likes to know about romance, especially romance drama. So let's try to like get an interview with Geen and try to hook this whole thing up. It'll at least be more exciting than just taking videos on the boat. So they're like, yeah, our views have been in the pits lately. Everybody loves things like romance. And then Toshio's like, oh, you mean I could broadcast my love to the whole world over the internet? And they're like, oh, you're not going to be on camera. I love that he had the comb and everything. And they're like, oh, no, sir, we're not filming you. And then the woman from the lunch line, she's being like, you need to stay at least 5 meters from these young girls. What is her name? I feel like, I'm like, what is her name in this? I feel like I should know. Is it Yumiko? Is it Yumiko? I don't know. Yes, it is Yumiko. Okay. I was making sure my name of my character. So Yumiko is, I love her character so much. Yumiko is great. So yeah, and so then once we saw that the two of them were in line to get the soft serve, it's like, oh, that's not who they were referring to. Because at first I was like, well, she's right there. But then Shirase says, my mom always left me with Geen, but I never really talked to her. I mean, Geen was with her an awful lot. And not with Kane there as well. Just the two of them. I think that Geen liked Takako romantically. I think she did. And I think Takako, whether she knew that or not, or reciprocated those feelings, I don't know. Shirase was pretty young when all that was going on, so she may not have noticed if it was being reciprocated or not. But yeah, I mean, her watching her, it's not just something that, you just leave your friend to do. Which is interesting. So yeah, she was pretty eccentric to me. I was still in kindergarten back then. I mean, her mom passed, here's the thing. Her mom passed 3 years ago when she would have been in middle school. So Geen and Takako had a relationship, or at least a friendship at the very least, for several years. Quite a long time. Even, I mean, if we go back to episode 7, even dating back to when they were in high school. So they've been together for quite a while. Interesting. I'm curious that we don't know anything about Shirase's dad, but I guess that doesn't matter. He's not around or he's died. I don't know. Interesting. They're like, how's the love life? And they'll ask her and she's like, I don't want to do this. I'm actually glad that Shirase did not go in for the interview because it's very clear Shirase is not comfortable interviewing to begin with. She's just kind of doing it to try to overcome that. But when it's someone like Geen who is tied to the death of her mom, I think it's appropriate for her not to have been interviewing her because that's getting into some awkward subject matter. And it also made it to where when they talked later on, that have a lot more weight because they hadn't seen each other the entire episode and then they had to come together and talk. So I really, really, really liked that. And we didn't get it resolved in this episode. No, not at all. it's still not resolved. We just have introduced it back into the present timeline. But I like that the friends are trying to get Shirase to talk to her. Kane is trying to get Gin to talk to Shirase. She says, we always had trouble communicating with each other. But then they both, the scene where they both look at the screen and see the penguins coming on screen and they're like, a penguin! Okay, y'all, did it not make you think of Forrest Gump? Am I the only one? When they're just like, if you've ever watched Forrest Gump, when Forrest Gump, he's with the little boy, and I don't want to spoil Forrest Gump for you. If you've not seen it, you should watch that movie. But whenever they're both like looking at the screen, they both go and tilt their heads at the same time. That's what it reminded me of. And honestly, Takako's personality is a lot like Komori's. It's a lot like our main character's personality, where she's bubbly and bright and enthusiastic and a go-getter. And Gin notices that way back in like episode 4. She's like, you're suited for the Arctic. She kind of sees, I think, Takako in Komori. Whereas with our girl Shirase's personality seems much more like Gin's. Shirase seems a lot more like Gin's. Like, they're more alike than they realize, right? And then Kane's like, look, Takako's gone now, so you might want to get to know her daughter because she's the only thing left that could remind you of Takako. Whether they're similar or not, she's your last connection to her, so you might want to get to know her, right? And Kane talks about how Shirase said her mom is waiting for her. And Gin's like, I made the call to call off the search. That was one sentence in this episode, but that had such a weight to it. Because essentially she's like, I made this. She's like basically said, I pulled the plug. I made the choice to stop looking for her. And any chance of saving her, I put the kibosh on that. Which is to tell that to the daughter of the woman that you left behind. There's a lot of emotions there. And I don't think Shirase hates her, but I think Shirase is like, I don't know what to feel. I'm so glad this series does such a good job of, even if the communication isn't clear and there, this show does such a good job of explaining that these characters are struggling to communicate, which is half the battle. At least if the other party knows you're struggling, that's half the battle. So when Shirase is like, I don't know how to feel. I don't know if I should forgive you or if I shouldn't forgive you, if I should be mad at you, if I should be over it. She's like, I don't know what to do. And at least they've opened up that channel of communication that they kind of each know where they're coming from, right? So Shirase doesn't go to interview them, and they're like, we want to ask you some personal life questions. And Kane's like, what's your type? Oh my gosh, they're asking you all the great questions. Kane's great. I love her character so much. She's such a breath of fresh air in this. But also, another way in which Shirase and Gin are similar is that they both are terrible at interviews. And that's how they're very similar, which, Takako would be all about it. She's like, I'm not answering questions unrelated to the Antarctic expedition. The high school girls have questions for you. They're like, please. Our views have been dropping lately. And they're like, her ears are bright red. Aww. So she doesn't. Also, it's the idea of changing the way the filter is on her eyes. That is so creepy. Look, I don't use Instagram or TikTok for filters or Facetune or these other things. I don't use them. Maybe Snapchat has a filter, but I usually like the natural one because a lot of them make you look like a cartoon. I am just now learning that influencers are using filters to make their bodies look different and stuff like that. I didn't know that was a thing. I knew AI was doing some stuff like that, but I was like, oh, that's so creepy. Ew, that's very creepy. So I'm like, ugh. What happened to camera angles? And getting the right shot. So yeah, just wild. But they're in the Antarctic Circle. So I think it does something really smart in this episode by showing us just how big Antarctica is, even though it seems small in our minds, perhaps. Showing us like the depth and the expanse of the region because we're just barely getting into the circle, into the continent. Also, the idea the icebergs are like clouds. And that's how Geen describes that her type is someone like a cloud. That's what she said. I like Toshiro's like, I don't know what that means. Toshiro's so real. He's like, there's cirrus and stratus and cumulus. He's like, I don't know. What do you mean like a cloud? What is that? What is that supposed to mean? What am I supposed to be like? What? And they're like, you're so boring. He's like, I don't understand. And they're like sitting, I mean, they're sitting on the grass looking up at the clouds. Some would say they were just friends. Historians would say that Geen and Takako were just friends. You can't grasp them, but when you look up, they're always there. I mean, that is an interesting type. Basically, she's describing someone who is supportive, but seems like divine, out of reach for them, out of their league. Like, for Geen to say that her type is someone that seems out of her league is a pretty bold statement, but also kind of like idealistic. She's basically describing Takako. Essentially, she's describing Takako. Is who she's describing in this description. And Toshio does not understand what it means. And he's like, I don't know. I wish I knew. I feel bad for this poor guy. I do. Now, everybody on the ship seems to want Geen to open up and communicate with Shirase because they know that it's Takako's daughter. But she's like, this kid probably hates me and she probably hasn't forgiven me. And the one guy's like, the captain needs to be able to check in and talk to their crew members, so you need to rectify that. Like, I like that she's trying to make an excuse of why she doesn't want to talk to Shirase, being like, well, she probably hasn't forgiven me. And he's like, well, you need to figure out what to do about that. You know how dangerous this mission is. Which, interesting. So yeah, we have the whole jump rope scene. I was trying to figure out what Yuzuki did in this moment. I'm like, are they talking about frostbite ears? Like, she says, ouch. And like, oh, I guess she hit her ear with it, and so it's made it even redder, probably than usual. But yeah, poor Yuzuki, sweetheart. And then Shirase sees the penguins, and so does Geen. Meanwhile, Toshio asks the one guy what it means to be a cloud, and he's like, well, I can't really put it into words. And Toshio's like, damn it. I can't figure it out. So yeah. So Geen in the flashback asks Takako if she's just literally having her stick around with Shirase to get to know her better. And Takako says she needs your spirit after all. And she's like, well, she's your child. I love that. I like the idea that Takako viewed Geen as being a good role model for Shirase. And maybe Takako saw that Geen was more like her than Takako herself. Interesting. So then they have the conversation, and Geen's like, I just want to know how you feel about me. And she's like, my mother told me that it was going to be a dangerous expedition, but she still wanted to go. I said it in the reaction, I like that they made Takako look different from Shirase. Like, there are clear similarities. You can tell they're mother and daughter, especially the eyes, but her lips are different. Her hair is different. There's enough differences there that you're like, okay, they're mother and daughter, but they're not twins, you know? She's like, I knew what kind of place Antarctica was. And she asked Geen if she made a mistake. Was my mother left in Antarctica because of your poor judgment? And she doesn't answer that question. And that's the missing piece. We're knowing more and more about the situation, about what happened after she went missing and her final moments. But what we don't know yet in the series is what led to that moment. What led to that? My worry is this series is going to be a bitch and replay what that scenario was. The only thing is they'll actually rescue the person that's in that situation, whereas Takako died in the flashback. Whoever gets in that situation is going to get rescued this time around. Show, don't do that. But I have a feeling you might. And that's what we're waiting on, for Geen to have a moment where she remembers the situation and how Takako got in that situation. And then they have to try to rectify and not let it happen a second time. Show, I don't know if you're going to do that or not, but I would not put it past you. And she says, is that how you really feel? Now, when she asked her how she really felt, I thought Shirase was going to break down. I thought Shirase was going to be like, because I think what Geen wants her to do is to like scream and say it's your fault. Why did my mom die? And for her to actually genuinely mourn her mother's death. Because like Kane said earlier in this episode, Shirase's not really mourned her mother's death. She has always kind of pushed it off as, I'm going to go find my mother. My mother's lost. But I'm like, when she gets to Antarctica, is she finally going to mourn that? And I think Geen wants her to finally just let it all out. But she's like, I don't know. And this is why I didn't want to talk about it. Because I don't know how to feel. I'm glad they have this moment. I'm glad she breaks down enough to tell Geen to be like, I don't know how to feel. I didn't want to have this conversation because this is really difficult and I don't know what to think. She's like, even though my mom wasn't coming home, I lived every day waiting for her to come home like she was going to day after day. But she never did. And I wanted to come to where my mother is to kind of figure it all out. And before they get any further in the conversation, they talk about some fast ice. I wanted to look up what fast ice was to see exactly what it is. Fast ice, according to the wiki, is sea ice or lake ice that is fastened, to the coastline. When they said fast ice, I'm like, did it just form really quickly? But it's fastened to the coastline, to the sea floor, along shoals, or to grounded icebergs. Fast ice may either grow in place from the seawater or by freezing pieces drifting ice to the shore or to other anchor sites. Unlike drift or pack ice, fast ice does not move with currents and winds. The width and presence of this ice zone is usually seasonal and depends on ice thickness, topography of the seafloor, and islands. It ranges from a few meters to several hundred kilometers. Seaward expansion is a function of a number of factors, notably water depth, shoreline protection, time of year, and pressure from the pack ice. In Arctic seas, the fast ice extends down to depths of 20 meters, while in subarctic seas, it can extend 10 meters or 32.8 feet. So that's like 60 feet worth of ice. That's a lot of ice. Some coastal areas with abrupt shelf and no islands, such as Okhotsk off of Hokkaido, tides provide the formation of any fast ice. Smaller ocean basins contain the only fast ice zone with no pack ice, in such as McMurdo Sound in Antarctica. Oh, interesting. Okay. So I like the fact that Hokkaido has had some fast ice as well, so the people in Japan would kind of probably be somewhat familiar with it. The topography of fast ice varies from smooth, level to rugged. The ice foot refers to ice that is formed at the shoreline through multiple freezing of water with ebb tides and separated from the remainder of the fast ice surface by tidal cracks. Fast ice can survive one or more melting seasons, aka summer. Its boundary is a limit between the fast ice or drift or pack ice in places. It could be delimited or enclosed pressure ridges which extend blah, 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 blah. Interesting. Okay. And so they're basically like, our solution to getting through the pack ice is just to barrel through it. Just to barrel through it. It's such a wild thing. There are 2 points of history here that I find so interesting in this moment, because this is taking place in modern times, like in the 2000s. One is, I think back to the Titanic. When I was on vacation, we went to a Titanic exhibition where they had actually exhumed a piece of the actual Titanic ship, which it was a tiny piece and it was as big as my house. It was just incredible. But the idea that back then it was considered top of the line and could not handle an iceberg at all. And here you have a ship just crushing through it like it's nothing, which granted, it's not an iceberg, it's fast ice, it's different. But still, the concept that technology has allowed for this ship to move through it, where other expeditions, like I think of the one that tried to go through Canada that got stuck up there and they all died, that was not able to do such things. The Titanic, like all these, it's so interesting to see how technology has evolved to overcome those obstacles, right? So I thought that was so interesting. So they say it's difficult to reach land from here, and they're like, then why did we come here? And then they talk about World War II, which, get your history hats on. So rules about Antarctic exploration were formalized after World War II. And she's like, do you know about that? I would imagine something as significant as World War II would be something you'd learn about at an early age. I would imagine. It feels, like the Revolutionary War or something here in the US. Or World War II. Japan had lost the war, and so many countries were opposed to Japan sending expeditions to Antarctica. Which, in hindsight, I get. After World War II, tensions were really high during and after World War II. I get it, and that's an understatement of the century. But there's nothing on Antarctica. It's like penguins and ice. I'm like, okay, but it was a power move. It was a military power move. You can absolutely understand why they would do that, especially post World War II. You get it. So like in the end, we were allotted East Ongull Island, which was said to be unreachable. And when they said, you mean they bullied you? Understatement of the century. I was like, ooh. I'm always fascinated because I'm from the US. So my perspective about World War II is very different from what I learned in history in World War II is very different from countries outside of the US. So it's fascinating, that perspective of it. What's interesting to me that stuck with me was this show's taking place in the 2010s, almost 80 to 90 years later. And I know in the grand scheme of history, 80 to 90 years is not a long time. It's not. It really is not in the grand scheme of history. But for modern society, it's been nearly 100 years, and you're still telling Japan that they can only enter the Antarctic through this like nearly impossible channel that you all know is really difficult. I'm like, you can't revise that. We can't have a committee to revise who can visit Antarctica on what side. We can't. What are y'all doing there? That fascinates me. It really does. And I know that I like the way that the story goes in this episode where they're like, well, we just took that as a challenge and said, fine, in your face. And it ties to Shirase later on. You don't think we can do this? In your face, we're going to. You don't think we can get there? In your face, we're going to. So I like the way that they twist it to make it into a lesson and a way of motivation, right? Like a way to spurn innovation. When they found themselves on the brink of giving up, they dug deeper and pressed on, like breaking through ice again and again. And it's this idea of motivation that inspires Shirase, inspires Gin, inspires all of them to go there, right? And then you have Takako in that one scene saying to get them. I love that one shot of Takako saying get them. I love that scene. There's a long way until we get there. But year after year, again and again. And then we go back to them looking for Takako. So they're searching for her, but they can't find her, and there's the snowcat. And then as she's sitting there, her radio goes off and says, it's beautiful. It's so very beautiful. But we don't know where she is. I want more context. I want to know what happened. But the show is not ready to tell us everything that happened. So we're just getting little bits and pieces as we go. But that's interesting. I learned something in history today, which feels great. And then Toshio, you know what? Two things. One, Toshio finally gets to Gin, and she is sobbing, thinking of Takako. And he's like, I was serious, but she didn't even notice me. And then, Yumiko's there like, sure, bud. Sure, Jan. What gets me in all of that is that I wanted him to kind of go and comfort her. But to me, that tells me that he was not ready or that serious about that relationship, because if he couldn't offer a comforting like arm around her shoulder or a hug in that moment, then I'm like, dude, I don't think you were ready for her. She might be out of your league. And then he immediately tries to flirt with Yumiko, and she's like, no, not you. But yeah, and then of course we have Shirase, having her moment as they're getting closer and reflecting. I can relate so much to when they're trying to pack up the boxes and they're like, how did it all fit so neatly before? Every time you go somewhere, it does not matter how good you pack going there, coming back, you will face the same question. How did I do this? How did this all fit perfectly the first time around? What happened? Nothing changed. I didn't get anything extra, but it doesn't fit as well as before. And then they stepped outside, and there they are. Now, I tell them to stay within 5 meters because, again, we're not going to be here forever, but also, we've made it. I also love all their different hats. They're so cute. I like that they're all different. Hinata's like, I don't need no hat. It's like, I'll just get in the way. But yeah, I cannot imagine how cold it is. Like, I felt cold watching this. And then I love when they're standing there on the ladder at the end, like wondering what to do and when to step off. And I love Hinata as the camera, and she just has a little head tilt. It's so precious. It's so cute. And then them all grabbing each other. At first I thought Shirase was going to just take the step herself, but she's afraid to. And I love that our girl holds her hand out and she's like, come on, take it. And we'll do it together. That was so sweet. I thought that was adorable. Like, like Tamaki, our girl. That was such a sweet friend moment. And then, yeah. And then they all jumped together. That was great. And like, we're here. We made it. And then we had the in-your-face moment. Now, at the very end, I almost thought that we had a ghost come up. I almost thought that we had a ghost. Because when that message popped up on the computer, for a second, I thought it was from Shirase's mom. And I was like, what? From beyond the grave? She's been trying to text her this whole time. But no, it's from Tamiko Shiraishi. It's from Yuzuki's mom. I was like, a ghostly message. But no, it's from Yuzuki's mom. I have no clue what she would be emailing her about in the Antarctic, but maybe we're going to find out next episode. But yeah, this was such a good episode. I really, really enjoyed this. I thought it was great. I love seeing these characters get closer. I love the themes. This series is very good about creating themes and doing callbacks and having it all tied together. I think it works so, so well. I really, really like it. I think it's great. But yeah, our girl Kamari and all of them getting ready to see what's on the Antarctic surface. I'm excited to see where it goes. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts down below, but I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'm back very soon with episode 10 of A Place Further Than the Universe. Bye!